Chairman Paul, Ranking Member Clay. It's an honor to be here, especially given that I am a former member of the staff of this committee and that I served on the team that drafted the Humphrey-Hawkins Full Employment and Balanced Growth Act. I wish to speak mainly today in defense of the dual mandate, the plural mandate, the flexible and practical language of present law. That law was drafted at a time of acute theoretical conflict in economics and on the staff. I was a young full employment liberal. One of our colleagues, James Pierce, former Federal Reserve Research Director, was a mainstream Keynesian at the time. Two other colleagues, Robert Auerbach and Robert Weintraub, were Chicago monetarists trained by Milton Friedman. We compromised on language that gave clear reporting, transparency, and accountability requirements to the Federal Reserve in the presence of ultimate objectives, but that did not impose anyone's theoretical views. Had we done so, I fear the oversight process would have failed long ago, perhaps when mainstream economics adopted the concept of a natural rate of unemployment in the early 1980s, perhaps when classical monetarism, the relationship between money and prices, fell apart shortly after that. Instead, being flexible, the process has survived for over 35 years, even though the theories come and go. Now, price stability is written into current law as an objective of monetary policy. It is the presence of the maximum employment objective alongside price stability, in my view, that gives the Federal Reserve leeway to pursue inflation targeting at some rate other than zero if it chooses to do that. Similarly, if in some alternate universe the Federal Reserve were to pursue a full employment strategy at all costs, the presence of the price stability language would give you legitimate cause to question its policies and the reasoning behind it. Having price stability alone in the Charter would put the Federal Reserve in the position presently occupied by the European Central Bank, a very difficult position, obliged to pretend to ignore unemployment even as that issue becomes increasingly important in the politics of the region it's responsible for, obliged to pretend to reach Charter when circumstances dictate that in fact it deviate from it, and it would put the Federal Reserve in a perpetually difficult, I think, false position before Congress, really make it very difficult for the Federal Reserve to report forthrightly on what it's doing, and I think it would equally put the Congress in an extremely difficult position as, unlike the European Central Bank, which is an independent entity, the Federal Reserve is not and cannot be independent of Congress. It is a creature of Congress under the Constitution. I think also that creating a single rigid price stability mandate would bring back the technical difficulties that we experienced in the 1970s and 1980s over the definition of money. The definition of price stability would become similarly problematic. If one looked at the notional definitions of inflation presently in use, I think you would find that the Federal Reserve did not, in fact, violate its price stability mandate in the run-up to the Great Crisis. It would be very hard to know before the fact when it was doing something that was not consonant with that mandate. Finally, this is a time of ferment in economics, once again, as the 1970s were. The profession fell into complacency before the Great Crisis, and the crisis delivered a shock from which economics has not recovered. Issues of the cost of resources, as yet, I think, unfinished project of financial reform remain unresolved. Unemployment is not going away, as many prominent forecasters believed it would have by now, and there are limits to what the Federal Reserve can achieve. Reasonable price stability, which was the language in the Humphrey-Hawkins preamble, as I recall, is an important objective, but so is full or maximum employment. Congress would be well advised not to commit to one to either one at the sacrifice of the other. I do urge Congress to continue to pursue the goals of oversight, accountability, and to probe deeply what the Federal Reserve is doing, but within the framework of present law. Thank you very much.
I thank you now. I recognize